Recently, all kinds of exciting new technologies like quantum computing, machine learning, ChatGPT have been making the news. And here at Menlo, we're exploring all of those topics and more. But in my computer science classroom, some of the most important ways that we build a sense of community have nothing to do with technology. And some of my own experiences in education taught me that. Now, as an elementary school student, I was a handful. I wasn't following directions, I was hyperactive, I was never doing what the group was doing. And one day I came back to school after being out for almost a week. I was sick. And before too long, I was back to my usual antics. And my second grade teacher looked me right in the eye while I was clowning around, and she said, "Douglas, it was so nice and quiet last week when you weren't here." Now, I don't remember very much else about that year, but what stayed with me was how I felt. I felt like I had suddenly become invisible, that my teacher was telling me that the classroom was a better place without me in it. And that was devastating. Now, ironically, I ended up becoming a teacher. And at my first school, Dwight Englewood, I ended up teaching second graders who were just as challenging as I had been. Call it karma. But I had a wonderful mentor teacher named Mrs. Karen Ivins. And Mrs. Ivins was unassuming, soft-spoken, and elegant, and the kids were enthralled. And I was captivated too. I wanted to figure out how she could capture their attention so well. Maybe it was because she never yelled. Maybe it was because she smiled a lot. Maybe it was because she always used their first name when she spoke to them so that they knew she was speaking directly to them. I don't know. Try as I might, I could never get the kids to listen to me as attentively as they did to Mrs. Ivins. And after a year of student teaching, I never did figure it out. Now later, I ended up working as a tech integration specialist at Noble and Greenough School, just outside of Boston. And I had a standing meeting with Jenny Carlson Petrasik, who was the head of the middle school. And I would go into her office full of questions and things to ask about, and Jenny would always start every meeting by asking how I was, how my kids were doing, what I was planning to do over the break. And we would just end up talking, and sometimes we'd go pretty far into our allotted time, and we'd never get around to talking about the important stuff like the purchase orders and the budget and how we were going to schedule all the science teachers into the computer lab the next week. And as time went on, I began to wonder if maybe Jenny was just really bad at time management. But things just happened around her. Budgets got filed, orders were filled, and the computer lab just sort of started to run itself after a while. And it wasn't until many years later, when I had my own staff and I was running my own meetings, that I realized that by starting each meeting by talking about me, Jenny was showing me that I was the most important thing at that moment. That who I was and what I cared about in the grand scheme of things were more important than the day-to-day minutia. And then I thought back to Mrs. Ivins, how she would sometimes stop on the stairs with her arms full of books, and she'd put them down and she'd help a child tie their shoe. Or sometimes she would just reach out and ruffle a kid's hair affectionately for no other reason but just to say, "You and I are here in this moment together," and that's a special thing. Mrs. Ivins would ask each child how their parents were doing, whether the new bunny had a name, how they were feeling today, how the soccer game went, and she would remember every answer. Now, you see, I used to think that great teaching happened in the teachable moments, but what I finally realized was that great teaching happens in the spaces between the teachable moments. Great teaching happens with all of the ways that we provide for students to get to know us and to get to know each other as individuals. It happens in all of the things that we do, in all of the conversations that we have, in all of the ways that we show students that they matter, that even though the tools and the technologies and the projects may change, what doesn't change is that they are an essential part of the school community, that no one is invisible, and that everyone has value. And I took those lessons to heart, and I tried to bring them to my current job here at Menlo School, where I teach CS1, Introduction to Computer Science, with my partner teacher, Zachary Blickensderfer. And we are fortunate to have 11 student TAs who work with over 100 students who are in both CS1 and CS2. And that means just about every weeknight, someone is available to help and to talk things out. And what we found is that when students are stuck, they would rather get hints from an actual person than just go and get the solution outright online. We've also found that TAs can give powerful messages to students, like if a TA says to a student, "I believe in you. I was where you are a year ago, and I did it, and I know you can do it too." That means so much more coming from another student than from one of us. Now, a few years ago, we decided to make CS1 a pass-fail course. Now, here's the thing. It's not pass-fail because it's easy. CS1 is pass-fail because it's an extremely hard course. But being stuck on a really challenging and difficult puzzle with your friends around you and your classmates and TAs and teachers willing to help, well, it turns out that's pretty motivating. You see, we were worried that when we made it pass-fail, that students would slack off. But in fact, what we found is exactly the opposite. Students are completing more assignments, they're more creative, they're more resilient, and most importantly, students report feeling much less stressed because CS1 is a pass-fail course, but they're still working just as hard. They're also much more inclined to ask for help and engage us in a conversation because they don't feel like they're competing for the grades, and they don't feel like they're going to be penalized for not having the correct answer. Now, we also run lots of community events like Menlo's Puzzle Day, where students get together and in small groups they solve paper and pencil puzzles together. We also have in the spring Share Fair, where every computer science student shows their work to the greater community. All of these events play an essential role in building strong and supportive relationships between students that often last after the end of the course and sometimes even after graduation. And the students in my computer science class, the bonds of friendship and trust that are formed when students are challenged, supported, and celebrated are far more significant and resonant than the programming language they learned, or what kind of computer they used, or the scores that they received. As teachers, we play a vital role in building positive learning environments in our classroom. But it's not about the technology we use, or the AI we use, or the tests we create, because great teaching happens in the spaces between the classes and the tests and the teachable moments. It's what shows students that they're safe, that they're important, and that they're valued. And in the grand scheme of things, that's what creates the space for real learning to occur. Thank you.